I took 11 GCSEs and I got a 9 in all of them.
너무 잘했어. 완전 좋아. 진짜 잘했다.
And while like online you might see like some people say it's a breeze, I'll be brutally honest with you. It was a really big challenge and it took a lot of effort to get the grades that I did. The elusive grade 9 is only awarded to the top 5% of scorers within each exam, meaning that you really do have to be better than everyone else to get that top grade. And so doing so in all 11 of my subjects, like I did, put me in the top 0.03% of students. And I don't say this to brag, I say this to prove to you that the way I came up with, the exact study routine and study system I came up with really does work. Because I wasn't naturally smart. After hours of like changing things up, I kept refining, changing, trying new things until I was left with the final study framework, which I really just wish I knew earlier. Because if you follow this, the grades that I got are something that you can easily get too, if you're willing to put in the work. The first thing that I did was to know exactly what I needed to study, because clarity is probably the most underrated but really important thing when it comes to studying. For me, I've wasted countless hours like I'd be studying just to realize that it couldn't even come up in the exam. And since I also never knew like if something would come up in the exam or not, I would always be in this like sense of confusion and wondering if what I was studying would even come up in the exam. And such a bad feeling to have. It wasted so much time and it was just really unproductive. It seems so obvious now. Getting the basics down and doing the obvious things is what's going to set you apart. It's not some crazy study tip. But the obvious and underrated thing that you need to do is you need to get hold of your specs. And that's what I did, and it helped me so much. It made my life 100 times easier. Literally just search up Edexcel Biology GCSE spec and change the subject and example to what suits you, and the spec will come up. And here are the ways that I used the spec that you can directly copy, which helped me get the grades. Firstly, I used them as a checklist, so around like a month out of the exams, I went through all the specs of all of my subjects and I made sure that all of the topics that were listed inside of there I had at least covered in class. Because if not, for like the topics I hadn't studied, I made sure I self-studied them. For example, like last year, you might have missed like a lesson because you had a doctor's appointment and you never caught up on that, and that was the lesson that your class went through. Sometimes you can't even rely on your teachers to teach you everything, and that's not their fault. It's your job to go through the spec and kind of use it as a checklist to make sure you know everything on there, and that's how I used it, right? I also used it as a guide to like see where I should be focusing my revision on. So I went through like the spec with like a highlighter and used the traffic light system to ignore my strengths and focus on my weaknesses. And also, if you notice in the spec, there are going to be statements that are in bold, so I made sure to focus on those a lot. And the next thing that I did was I abused flashcards so much. When you do GCSEs, most of you are doing a lot of subjects, right? 10, 11, 9. And there are just a load of things that you need to remember. So what I did was, I sat down and for every single subject, I wrote down like the key facts, vocabulary, definitions, and things I knew that I just had no other choice but to just brute memorize. And I just wrote all of them down online onto like flashcards. And it was hard work, it was boring work. It literally felt like a full-time job. It took hours, but once I sat down, once I had written like these bank of flashcards, for languages it was vocabulary, for sciences it was equations and definitions. Even if you do end up with like 1,000 flashcards, you'd be surprised at how like once you've actually made the flashcards, if you just look at them consistently 5 minutes a day, or on your journey to and from school, which is personally what I did, right? You get through them really quick. And because the great part is, since you've actually done the memorization away from desk, when you actually sit down at the desk to do studying, like on desk studying, like I like to call it, you can actually focus on questions, practice forming essays, etc. And it's a far better use of your time, because I didn't have to like stop and like try and learn and memorize a fact, because I had done all that memorization beforehand and I could just focus on applying my knowledge and do questions at the same time. Because think of it this way, this analogy will make it really clear for you. The reason that piano teachers make you practice in between lessons is because away from lessons, you do the hard part. You memorize the notes, you go through and like make mistakes, and you do the hard and boring part of actually learning and memorizing how to play the notes by themselves. Because then it's during the lessons, like a week passes, and when you actually have the lesson, you can sit down and then you and your teacher go through the details, how to phrase, how to join the notes together, how to play them beautifully, right? But you can only do that with your teacher because you actually did the memorization and the boring parts of being actually able to just play the notes physically beforehand. Whereas if you hadn't done that beforehand and you had to use your on-desk studying time to do the memorization as well, because you hadn't learned the key concepts, it would have taken much longer. You should keep this in mind and use this same principle when you study. Focus on memorizing outside of your study times, and focus on doing questions at the desk. That's what I did. And before I get onto the thing that I did religiously every single day without fail to get the grades that I did, I just want to bring your attention to the Student Accelerator. It's my online program which not only teaches you the basics of studying, but it helps you transform yourself in all aspects to become the best student that you can be. Through hours of video courses, lectures, live Q&As, a community, you can see it really does work. With Sarah being an example of how she aced her exams, got the best in her whole school, and got the results that she deserved. And so if you want to find out more and you want to like check out all the details, that'll be the first link in the description. But anyway, back to the video and spilling the thing that I did religiously. So what I did every single day without fail, and the main reason I think that I got all 9s was because I did pass papers religiously. The majority of my study sessions would be just me sitting down, opening up a past paper, the mark scheme, and just doing them. It's quite repetitive and it's boring, but if I asked you, would you do the boring thing to get the best grades? The majority of you would say yes. I probably did at least 4 past papers for every single one of my exams, and I know my other friends who also got all 9s sometimes literally did 10 or every single past paper that exists. And it's not necessary to go that extreme, but it's proof that all the top students are doing it for a reason, because it trains you and prepares you in the best way possible, especially for GCSEs, because you end up doing retrieval practice. You actually end up applying the things that you brute force memorized outside of the study sessions. You can test how much you understand, you can test your induction and deduction, you can practice forming an essay and doing all of these skills that an exam asks of you. GCSE, like, it's kind of flawed in a way, and that's what a lot of, like, there's arguments online about it, but a student A might literally have 10 times more knowledge than student B, and student A like can explain it in their own words. But even if you know it, if you can't explain it in the way that the exam wants you to, you are going to get 0 marks. When you look at the mark scheme, you have to say it in a really specific way, and you can only get used to this nuance, the way that the examiners want you to be able to train yourself for an exam by actually doing past papers. Prepping yourself for an exam and writing answers in a way that they want is really, really crucial. I also kept a note of all of the mistakes and questions that I got wrong within these past papers, because revisiting your mistakes, like whenever you make a mistake in a past paper, is the most free way to get a quick boost to your like results. When you focus on the things that you got wrong, that's a weakness. Like, you were gonna get that wrong if that were an actual exam, right? So by training up your weaknesses, keeping a note of those, it's gonna help you do extra well in the exams, because you're not gonna get your mistakes wrong anymore. And so those were broadly the things that I did to get all 9s in my GCSEs, and follow these to get all 9s in your GCSEs also, hopefully. So good luck in whatever exams you have, good luck in your GCSEs, and stay tuned and watch some other videos that I have. But as always, I'll see you in the next video, and make sure to check out Student Accelerator first in the description.